Tot ce se întâmplă în Siria de la înăbușirea primăverii arabe încoace a dus la moartea 250.000 de oameni, iar 11 milioane de sirieni sunt refugiați. 4 milioane au fugit în afara granițelor.
Președintele sirian a declarat că liderii europeni se fac că nu văd cauza fenomenului imigrației care a aruncat bătrânul continent în haos. Bashar al-Assad susține că interesele celor care conduc lumea nu țin seama de soarta popoarelor, ci doar de bunăstarea unei categorii sociale restrânse deja privilegiată. Problema nu este dacă Europa primește sau nu refugiați, ci necesitatea de a înlătura cauza acestui fenomen. Dacă europenii sunt îngrijorați de soarta refugiaților, ar trebui să înceteze să îi mai sprijine pe teroriști. Președintele sirian a afirmat că își dorește să ajungă la un acord cu opoziția, însă nu aceasta este prioritatea sa. Bashar al-Assad își dorește ca grupările care îi se opun să îi se alăture pentru ca terorismul să fie eradicat. Este foarte greu, aproape imposibil să ajungem la un acord cât timp oamenii mor, cât timp este vărsare de sânge și oamenii nu se mai simt în siguranță. Chiar dacă vom ajunge la un acord politic, acesta este imposibil de implementat cât timp prioritatea cetățenilor sirieni este securitatea. Mai întâi trebuie să combatem terorismul. Interviul acordat de președintele din Damasc jurnaliștilor de la Russia Today a fost dat publicității la doar câteva zile după ce Statele Unite au atras atenția că Rusia și-a consolidat prezența militară în Siria. Kremlinul îl susține pe Bashar al-Assad.
In Syria we could say that every dialogue is a positive thing. And we're going to be open to any dialogue with anyone, including the United States, regarding anything based on mutual respect.
What kind of communication is there between your government and the American government?
There's no direct communication.
None at all?
No. Nothing yet. That's what the United States...
Nothing yet?
Nothing yet. Till this moment, no. Nothing.
Would you like to have that happen?
Any dialogue is positive, as I said, in principle, of course, without breaching the sovereignty of Syria.
So much of the power is in your hands to engage in the process. I mean, if they demand that you step down before they negotiate, that's unacceptable to you.
No external party has anything to do with the future of Syria, with the constitution or president or anything like this. No, we're not going to discuss it with them. This is the Syrian issue. Whenever the Syrian people want to change their president, it should be changed right away, in the same day, even if we exaggerate. Of course, it must be through a political process, through constitutional process. That's how we change presidents. Not through terrorism and external intervention.
This cannot end militarily. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. Every conflict, even if it's a war, should end with a political solution.
Понимаем, что необходимы и политические изменения. Мы ведем работу и с нашими партнерами в самой Сирии. И в целом есть понимание, что вот это объединение усилий в борьбе с терроризмом должно идти параллельно с неким политическим процессом в самой Сирии. И президент Сирии, кстати говоря, с этим согласен, вплоть до проведения досрочных выборов, скажем, в парламент, принятия, налаживания контактов с так называемой здоровой оппозицией, привлечения их к управлению.
Siria a organizat alegeri prezidențiale în ciuda războiului civil care devastează țara de mai bine de 3 ani. De altfel, scrutinul s-a desfășurat doar în zonele controlate de regimul Assad, nu și în cele controlate de rebeli.
Bashar al-Assad بمنصب رئيس الجمهورية العربية السورية.
Pentru prima dată în ultimele 5 decenii, la alegerile prezidențiale din Siria au candidat mai mulți politicieni, chiar dacă au obținut scoruri foarte mici. Hassan Nouri, profesor de economie și fost ministru, a primit 4,3% din voturi, în timp ce Maher Hajar, antreprenor și parlamentar, a luat 3,2%. Secretarul general NATO, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, a anunțat că niciuna dintre cele 28 de țări membre ale NATO nu va recunoaște rezultatele.
Assad must come to an end. Assad has to go.
It's time for Assad to get out of the way.
It is time for Bashar to go.
People in the West question your legitimacy.
This intervention in Syria matters. I don't care about it, to be frank. I never cared about it, as long as I have the public support of the Syrian people. That's my legitimacy. Legitimacy comes from the inside. But why? I will tell you why. Because the West used to have puppets, not independent leaders or officials in any other country. And that's the problem with Putin. They demonize Putin because he can say no and he wants to be independent, because the West, especially the United States, don't accept partners. They only accept followers. Even Europe is not a partner of the United States. That's to be very frank with you. So this is their problem with Syria. They need somebody to keep saying yes, yes man, a puppet, marionette and so on.
But are you prepared to urge Assad to step down if it would lead to an alternative political solution that would be a bulwark against ISIS going into Damascus?
Well, our moderator is a real American, I say. I'm saying without external interference, and he is saying whether I am ready to urge. Only Syrian people can urge President to step down. That's elementary. Well, I've said that we are ready to be in a dialogue with President Assad in the direction of him meeting and making the political reforms with the representatives of the so-called healthy opposition. I believe that is quite constructive and implementable.
In Syria, the only way that the civil war will end, and in a way so that the Syrian people can unite against ISIL, is an inclusive political transition to a new government without Bashar al-Assad, a government that serves all Syrians. I discussed this with our Gulf Cooperation Council partners at Camp David and during my recent call with President Putin. I made it clear the United States will continue to work for such a transition. Given the extraordinary threat that ISIL poses, it is important for us to work together as opposed to at cross purposes to make sure that an inclusive Syrian government exists.
The concern that Syria might submerge into the same situation as Syria can become Libya, or like Iraq, because you know, before the authorities in Iraq and Saddam Hussein himself were destroyed, there were no terrorists there. There had been no terrorists. Let's not forget that, because it's actually, people prefer not to speak about that, but who created the conditions and how the conditions were created for terrorism to outburst on that territories? Isn't that clear how, after the invasion to Iraq, the authorities have been destroyed, Saddam was hanged, and then the ISIS came there, the Islamic State. And what happened in Libya? Full disintegration, no state at all. Even the diplomatic service of the US have felt losses, and we do not want similar scenario to be implemented in Syria. That is the baseline of our position to support President Assad and his government at the moment, and we believe that the position is correct. We are urging to find the political settlement way, which of course would provide for transformation of the political regime, and we are ready to discuss that with President Assad as well. By the way, just recently, in the UN, an opportunity of cooperation with President Assad was declared in struggling with ISIS and other terrorist groups and formations. And we are ready to work with the President for the sake of providing political transformation. For all the people living in Syria feeling the access to the instruments of power, of course, in order to avoid the military solution of the conflict.
Has said that his aim is to, quote, degrade and ultimately destroy the terrorist group known as ISIL. A year into the US-led bombing campaign of ISIL, how close is he to achieving those goals in your view? Is he destroying, is he degrading ISIL even?
Yeah, I think that he's degrading them. I don't think that we'll ever destroy this organization. I mean, we may cause it to change its name, but we are never going to destroy this organization. And I think we've wasted so much time, we wasted so many years of just basically being inefficient at what is very doable to defeat this enemy, this threat.
We hear very little about America's own responsibility in this conflict, in this problem. Isn't it the case, General, that there would be no ISIL today in Iraq if the US hadn't invaded and occupied Iraq in 2003?
Yeah, I think that looking back, there were a number of strategic errors that were made. You have to look back over 50, 60, 70 years, and you can even look back longer, but we definitely put fuel on a fire that was...
By invading and the behavior
that had some embers there. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. I mean, when we, history will not be kind to the decisions that were made certainly in 2003.
There's Syria. You're on record of saying the handling of Syria by this administration has been a mistake. Many people would argue that the US actually saw the rise of ISIL coming and turned a blind eye, or even encouraged it. The US saw the ISIL caliphate coming and did nothing.
Yeah, I think that where we missed the point, I mean, where we totally blew it, I think, was in the very beginning. I mean, we're talking 4 years now into this effort in Syria. Most people won't even remember. It's only been a couple of years. The Free Syrian Army, that movement. I mean, where are they today? Al-Nusra, where are they today? And how much have they changed?
Just to clarify here, you're saying today my understanding is you're saying we should have backed the rebels. You're saying in government you agreed with this analysis.
We should have done more earlier on in this effort, than we did.
But in 2012, which was 3 years ago, let's just be clear, just for the sake of our viewers. In 2012, your agency was saying, quote, the Salafists, the Muslim Brotherhood, and Al-Qaeda in Iraq are the major forces driving the insurgency in Syria. In 2012, the US was helping coordinate arms transfers to those same groups. Why did you not stop that if you're worried about the rise of quote-unquote Islamic extremism?
I mean, I hate to say it's not my job, but my job was to ensure that the accuracy of our intelligence that was being presented was as good as it could be.
You are basically saying that even in government at the time, you knew those groups were around, you saw this analysis, and you were arguing against it, but who wasn't listening?
I think the administration.
The administration turned a blind eye to your analysis.
I don't know if they turned a blind eye. I think it was a decision. I think it was a willful decision.
A willful decision to go support an insurgency that had Salafists, Al-Qaeda, and Muslim Brotherhood.
A willful decision to do what they're doing, which you have to really ask the president, what is it that he actually is doing with the policy that is in place, because it is very, very confusing.
Last year you drew some heat for your letter to President Bashar al-Assad in Syria because you basically thanked him for helping to protect Christians that were being slaughtered and persecuted during the civil war there by the jihadist groups. But now here we are a year later, and the dialogue continues as to whether or not the U.S. will allow President Assad to remain in power. What is the situation like from your perspective in Syria at this point?
You know, I think the letter that I wrote has played out exactly as I had predicted. What we have now, Saudi Arabia and Turkey have formed something called the Army of Conquest. They did this back in March, and they have coordinated ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And when I say Al-Qaeda, they call it al-Nusra, but it's Al-Qaeda in Syria, so I'll refer to it as Al-Qaeda. They've coordinated them, and they've begun a drive against the Syrian government. Syria still holds most of the population centers. I won't speak to Obama in particular. I will tell you, beginning in 2011, Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, put into place a series of actions to overthrow the secular governments in the Middle East and to replace them with radical Islamic regimes. Why she was doing this, I know she has great connections, financial and otherwise, with Saudi Arabia, with Qatar, with Kuwait, with some of the tyrants. I think clearly the coalition against Syria is in utter dramatic violation of the law of land warfare. I hope and prayer that the United States will wake up and say, you know what, it's time to end this slaughter. It's time to stop trying to topple regimes, bring order to the Middle East, stop the bloodshed. If we stop training jihadists and arming jihadists, the war will end, because the war has never been a domestic uprising since the very beginning.
Problema nu este dacă Europa primește sau nu refugiați, ci necesitatea de a înlătura cauza acestui fenomen. Dacă europenii sunt îngrijorați de soarta refugiaților, ar trebui să înceteze să îi mai sprijine pe teroriști.